உள்ளதலதுள்ள உணர் உள்ளதோ உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளலற உள்ளத்தே உள்ளதா உள்ளம் எனும் உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளல் எவன் உள்ளத்தே உள்ளபடி உள்ளதே உள்ளல் உணர்வாயே. Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been meditating on Bhagavan's work, Ulladu Narpadu. To bring it to context, we are in verse number 15. We have gone through verse number 8, which dealt with how the reality can be worshipped with form, but however an inquiry will finally lead to that which is the self. Then in 9, Bhagavan opens up one of the ways in which the jnana uses the nama or concepts in worship, in upasana. So in jnana the words are different, the concepts are different. We felt that directly the personal God, personal deity is not invoked, but dualities and triads were dealt with in verse number 9. That dualities, the whole of the experience was divided as either dualities or triads, but they always occur to one, and when the truth of that one is inquired into, all dualities and triads fall away. And that led us to Bhagavan taking the primary duality in Jnana Marga, that is knowledge and ignorance, and taking us through verse 10, 11, 12 and 13 through that duality. So we will not go into that again, but Bhagavan thoroughly takes us to the self. The verse number 13 and verse number 14, which we just saw last week, we'll be referring to them when discussing verse number 15. So a brief look at what we discussed in verse number 13 and verse number 14. In verse number 13, Bhagavan says, Jnanamam tane me nanavam jnanam ajnanamam. Poyyam ajnanamume jnanamam tanne yandri. Then he gives the analogy of the ornaments and the gold, that multiplicity is false and the self, which is of the nature of existence consciousness, is alone the truth. That was the verse number 13, and we'll be referring to that while looking at verse number 15 today. So remember that Bhagavan says, Jnanamam tane me nanavam jnanam ajnanamam. That the self, which is of the nature of consciousness, alone is the truth, and wherever multiplicity is there, treat it as falsity and inquire for whom is this multiplicity. That is verse number 13. Verse number 14 dealt with personalities, and we had seen how the jiva bhava is one of grasping, and of course aversion was part of that grasping, that the jiva bhava is one of clasping on to certain limited conditionalities and saying this is me, and feeling afraid that when those are not there, then I am myself not there. So that verse went as Tanmai undel munnilai padarkaigal tamulavan தன்மையின் உண்மையை தானாய்ந்து தன்மையறின் முன்னிலை படர்க்கை முடிவுற்றொன்றாய் ஒளிரும் தன்மையே தன்னிலைமைதான். That is, when the first person who is grasping on to certain bodily parts, certain memories, certain anticipations. All this he grasps together or she grasps together, he and she also being part of the conditionalities, and says that that is me. And that we slowly inquired that what is the jiva? Jiva is not the contents, because we saw that the contents are all changing. However, there is an identity that continues. So we brought it down to the ability to grasp itself, the ability of consciousness to grasp itself, because that doesn't change. The ability to grasp that doesn't change. So we reduced in the limited area that the first person or the jiva is the ability to grasp and say that this is me. Now that also we are going to refer to in this verse. Point number 1, we will be referring to Jnanamam Talemai, Nanamam Jnanam Ajnanamam. And also, whenever they need to grasp certain contents, either knowingly or unknowingly, that content may even be ignorance, then grasping that and saying that this is me is the Jiva Bhava. And when that Jiva Bhava as first person is inquired into and the need to grasp is seen as ignorance, the light of consciousness is ever free, then the first person vanishes, and along with the first person, so do the second person and third person including he, she, it. So it includes all the objects also. All of them vanish and the self alone is. That was verse number 14. So let us remember these two things, and we'll be discussing about remembrance itself in the current verse. We go on to the current verse, which is verse number 15. நிகழ்வினை பற்றி இறப்பு எதிர்வு நிற்ப நிகழால் அவையும் நிகழ்வே நிகழ்வொன்றே இன்றுண்மை தேராது இறப்பெதிர்வு தேர உணல் ஒன்றின்றி எண்ண உணல். This is the verse. நிகழ்வினை பற்றி இறப்பெதிர்வு நிற்ப நிகழ்கால் அவையும் நிகழ்வே நிகழ்வொன்றே இன்றுண்மை தேராதிறப்பெதிர்வு தேர உணல் ஒன்றின்றி எண்ண உணல் உணர. That is the verse. So we are coming to a segment which will be using the verse number 13 and 14, the idea that Jnanamam Talemai, and that the idea as grasping on to some contents is Jiva Bhava, and realizing this and letting go and realizing the self is being freed of that. From here on, verse number 15 onwards, Bhagavan is going to take us to some major concepts in which the seen world or the God's creation is referred to by the human experience. And one of the primary major concepts we come across in creation is time, and time is dealt with in verse number 15. Time and place together are dealt with in verse number 16. Verse number 17 is about the nature of the body or the bodies. Verse number 18 is about the nature of the world itself, the whole world, the concept called the world. We can always recall that in the earlier part, Bhagavan says, apart from the body, there is no world to be perceived. So both those verses 17 and 18 can be considered to be talking of the same subject. Verse number 19 will take us to free will and fate, two favorite concepts of philosophers and nowadays neuroscientists also. Free will and fate are two concepts which will be taken through in verse number 19. 20, 21, 22 are directly about God. directly about what God is and what in reality God's nature is. 19, 20, 20, 21, 22. There we come to a halt of that segment, that is 8 to 22. I said it is about the Ishvara, how the Ishvara is seen and taught, and how his nature is taken to be self by Bhagavan, verses 8 to 22. From here on, 15 to 22, we are going to see Bhagavan take us through the macro up to these verses, up to verse number 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We can say that the Ulladu Narpadu, though it can be looked at in the macro point of view also, it still dealt with the individual. From here on, the same individual, the same need to grasp is going to be presented to us as facing not the individual problem alone, but the problem of all people together, all created beings together, what we face. So these verses are going to take us to an inquiry of the self, which covers in its body a much vaster area, and that's enough of an introduction for what we are going to see in future. But let's see what is this remembrance in the past and anticipation of these verses in future, what it really means in time, and what Bhagavan says. Let us see in this verse. The verse goes like this: Nigalvinai patri irappedurvu nirpa. Nigalvinai patri, and the humorous said, I used to say that these verses I would take in my own personal context, and however I am able to interpret, I'll apply it to self-inquiry and use it like that. So this word Nigal Vinay, for some years, 2004, 2005, 2006, I used to split it up as Nigal Vinay and say that karma which is happening, holding on to that alone is past karma and future karma is there. So therefore, I have to do self-inquiry on which all the past and future karmas depend. That is how I used to use for my personal purposes, but that's not the meaning there. But these off-the-cuff usages, so far as we keep self-inquiry in context, still play a role. That so far as you understand them as support for self-inquiry, and not independent of that, then it's all right, I suppose, but that interpretation is not required. What Bhagavan means by Nigalvu is the present. Nigalvinai patri irappu edurvu nirpa. Nigalvinai, Nigalvu here means present. Patri is grasping. We have seen, please remember, in verse 14, that the need to grasp or the ability to grasp itself is Jiva Bhava. Nigalvinai patri irappu edirvu nirpa. Irappu is past, edirvu is future. Nigalvinai patri irappu edirvu nirpa. This is a primary explanation that Bhagavan gives, that the past and the future arise holding on to the present. Let us briefly go into talks to see what Bhagavan tells about time itself. Then we can continue our discussion. This is in talk number 601. It's a brief paragraph. G.V. Subramanya, an Andhra devotee, mentioned something about time. Bhagavan. What is time? It posits a state, one's recognition of the state, and also the changes which affect it. The interval between two states is called time. A state cannot come into being unless the mind calls it into existence. The mind must be held by the self. If the mind is not made use of, there is no concept of time. If you don't take thought, there is no time. According to Bhagavan's teaching, time and space are in the mind, but one's true state lies beyond the mind. The question of time does not arise at all to the one established in one's true nature. This is what Bhagavan says about time. Now, that the time arises in the mind only, that without the mind there is nothing called time. We have seen slowly the science also come around to that. The scientific inquiry through physics and also neurosciences is slowly coming around to that point that time is really illusory in the sensory area. There is nothing like time there. There is only time in the mind. For that, we can refer to how from the sensory area, how it is brought to the mind, that the present, past and future are only in the mind. That helps us to understand that the past and the future are dependent on the present. There is a discussion which is famously known throughout philosophy, that the discussion or meditation on time by Saint Augustine. It is more in his capacity as a seeker of truth that he meditates on time. And the point is, he very nicely analyzed that if you slice the time into narrower and narrower time segments, then let us say, for the sake of discussion, there is an atomic time that cannot be divided further. We find that in the normal sense that if you take time is 1 second, then before you look at your circumstances of that 1 second, that 1 second passes into the past, and we anticipate something that comes and occupies the present, and then the present again moves into the past. There is something which is not known, which is called as about to come, that comes and occupies the present. This is how the time works. Time seems to work, and this is now contested even by the physicists or the neuroscientists, that time is not exactly out there. For that purpose, what Saint Augustine does is that he assumes that let there be an atomic time. Now, in that time itself, the past and future are present, and that atomic time does not participate in this area called space. That atomic time is beyond space. Therefore, it is in the mind. Now, that point has been cleared up by scientists, that is true, that there is nothing really in time as called time in the sensory world. It is only within us in the mind. How they arrive at it is very interesting. So I'll just present it to you, how they arrive at in the so-called present moment does not exist except in you, within us. Of course, we are aware that time is felt not only on the outside, the clock is there, the time is also felt within us. That has been discovered as a Nobel Prize winning concept, that the circadian concept of the clock, the biological clock within, the 24-hour adjustment, that the clock within us, which has now been reduced to a particular gene, that gene releases a particular protein, that release is done during sleep, which actually makes us healthy and all that, and that released protein is used or dissipated throughout the day, by which we get tired again and we are required to go to sleep that circadian rhythm that is present in all beings. They have done experiments with fruit. So there is a clock, there is a time that is within us, and there is a time that is outside of us. And the interesting finding that the scientists have made is that it is common knowledge that the circadian rhythm within, the clock within, is more intelligent than the clock outside. How so? That when we travel from one place to another, like from the US to India, or from you start working the night shifts in your software work, when the sleep cycle is changed, we find that the biological clock is able to adjust itself. Though it takes a bit of time, it adjusts itself. That is how the jet lag is overcome in a few days. That the inner clock is more intelligent than the outer clock. And we all understand that the body within is filled by the eye consciousness, the pindam mavya nadan. And from that we can take it to the who is this eye, who is having the more intelligent clock. That is one approach we can take. But coming back to the Saint Augustine and how they have eliminated the now, the present from the sensory world, just a brief look at that so that it is clear to us that what Bhagavan refers to as present is not the collection of objects that is existing before us. We are clear that the world picture is like slices of photographs which are all running in the picture kind of show, and the present slide it moves into the past, and something unknown comes into the present, and this is how the slide moves. So let us say that we have reduced it to one particular other indivisible moment. And in this indivisible moment, there is one straight line in which the objects are all arranged up to the farthest galaxy, which is, let us say, a billion or a millions or so light years away. That means the light from that galaxy takes a million years to reach the Earth. What is a light year? Light year is the distance traveled by light in 1 year at the rate of 3 lakhs kilometers or so per second. So like that it travels for a million years from the galaxy, and then it touches the eye. That means the light that I see has left that galaxy a million years ago. And we have seen earlier that what we see as the sun now, the light from the sun takes 8 minutes to reach our eyes. So we are not seeing the sun in the now moment. We are seeing the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. So the present sun, the system of senses which is dependent on the light can never see what is the present nature of the sun. It can only see what it was 8 minutes ago. To give some context, the millions of light years or billions of light years, I said that star itself may not be there. This was mentioned by one of the scientists in a talk in Ramanacentre Bengaluru, which was one of the first books I read about the connection between the time and the Atma, where he says, the speaker who is a scientist who has come to Ramanacentre to deliver a talk on science and spirituality, he says that star itself may not be there. It will be dead and gone, but to our eyes, we will feel it could have exploded and gone, because the ability to grasp is always limited and it can hold on only to that point where it cannot be further sustained. At that point, that unit or that body is said to disintegrate and go back to its fundamental elements. So that is how the stars die. So the star itself might have died, but we feel that it is there. So now the scientists have reduced it. Interestingly, these videos were not present when we were first discussing it in about 2 years back in Ulladu Narpadu. but now they are easily available on the net. It has become more common scientific knowledge that when we look at each other also, when we look at each other, suppose somebody is sitting close to me, or I am seeing this chair, let's assume the atoms in those chairs are having some movement, and therefore let us assume that there is a chair, there is a movement in that within it which I am not able to perceive, but it is there. Let us hold it like that. So even the chair, if the atoms have some movement and some change, and it is deteriorating, the chair has a life. It cannot remain like this. The plastic chair somebody had donated about 15 years ago. About 2 of them have remained from the 6. 4 have disintegrated and gone. That means those chairs also have a way of deterioration. Any body will have that. So I am not perceiving the chair as it is at the present moment. I am not perceiving the other as that person is in the now. So that means the I is never capable of perceiving another as it is in the now. So therefore there is no now movement for seeing at all. The seeing is always seeing of something past as it was some moments ago. And can the I see itself? Can the I see itself? It cannot see itself. That is why it is called as Jadam, or it is called as Drishya. Up to some point it is Drik, then it becomes Drishya. The I and its changes are perceived by the mind. Therefore, we will have to come to the mind time, that the I cannot see the present moment at all. The I does not have the present moment because it is using something that is caught up in time. The light that we see is traveling in time and space. Therefore, since the I itself, the sensory I, is using that time, it can never see what is in the now. The now moment is not there in the sensory area. So far as the now moment is concerned, where is it? It is only in the mind. As Bhagavan says, that it is directly only in the mind. This is how Augustine also works out, that the time is really present only in the mind more than in the world. How does it come in the mind? Because we have this inner clock. It is in the very nature of human beings to perceive regularities and irregularities outside. Since there is regularity of cycle inside, that very nature in us makes us look to what is all constant, what is repeating, and we are interested in those things, and from the mind we are able to superimpose it on the phenomenon, in which scientists say there is only the second law of thermodynamics which deals with entropy. That means a gradual deterioration as there is in this chair. Therefore, there is only time which is moving in one direction in the nature. But in the mind, it can move in both the directions. So, it is in the mind that we have past, future and present. Things that have passed, we call it as past. Things that exist, we call it as present. Things that are yet to come, we call them as future. But where are the 3 present? These 3 are present in the thought called present in the mind. So in the mind, Saint Augustine suggests there is the present, which is of existing things. There is the present past, which is in the present moment we are dwelling on our memory. The present he calls it as attention. The present past he calls it as dealing of memory. And the present future he calls it as anticipation. So it is all the 3 are in the mind. The present, the past and the future are an inner thing, are really not there in the phenomena, or the inner thing are in the mind, and it is all present within the concept called present. Because in the present moment, I can think of the past by using my memories. In the present moment, I can be engaged in what is happening in front of me, the so-called present in the sensory world. Or in the present moment, I can anticipate oh, this problem is never going to be solved, and become totally anxious, and thereby bring that anxiety to the present moment. So it is in the mind's present that all the three, the sensory past, the sensory present, and the sensory future are all present in the present moment. That's what Bhagavan says in the first line, that Nigalvinai Patri Irappedurvu Nirpa. It is holding on to this thought, within thought called present, that the thoughts of memories, that the thoughts of anticipations, and the thoughts of things existing right before us, all the three are present within the thought called present. So that is what Bhagavan says, Nigalvinai Patri Irappedurvu Nirpa. It is holding on to the present that the past and future arise. Nigalkal avayum nigalve. When the past was, yesterday was happening, it was called as present only. When tomorrow will come, when we view the present as a day, let the day's worries alone concern you. Let all the days to come, let they belong to God. Let the worries belong to God. That in that statement, the present is a day. The present moment is a day, and the chunks of movements are in that balloon, or in that shape, or the container which is called as present. That is actually one day within which all the events are called as present for our convenience. And where this convenience happens, that present can be one day, it can be 1 hour, it can be one moment, but that is according to our convenience. How does this happen? It happens with the convenience of the mind, which is able to say, this is the context in which I am looking at time. So, Nigalvinai Patri Irappedurvu Nirpa, Nigalkal avayam nigalve. When they come into being, come into existence, the yesterday was also known as this today, and tomorrow also, when it will come into being, it will be called as the present day only. It will be called today. Therefore, Bhagavan says, the past was also called as the present when it was happening, and the future will also be called as present when it will come into existence. Therefore, really speaking, there is only the present. Nigal Ondre. There is only the present for one to explore. The past and future are merely mental creations which you cannot do anything with. The present is the area of sadhana. The present is the moment in which consciousness can learn about the object, the act of perception, and oneself. So, Nigalkal, Avayam, Nigalve, Nigal Ondre. Let us put these ideas together. Bhagavan says, the past and the future are dependent or arise depending on the present. And when they come into being, they are called present only. Therefore, present is the only reality. Indrunmai theradu irapperu theravunal ondrendri ennavunal. That is the last concept or the idea that Bhagavan gives us, that without inquiring into the truth in the present moment. Indra is a context which Bhagavan brings. It should not be merely taken as today. It should be taken as the present. Indra unmai theradu. So this unmai theradu is where we bring in verses 13 and verses 14. Indra unmai theradu. Without inquiring into the truth in the present moment, inquiring into the past or the future is like saying that I am going to establish the whole number system without the number 1. The whole of counting I am going to do without recognizing the need for the first unit, the number 1. All the other numbers being merely an expansion or a multiplication of that particular first number. So the present moment is called as the first number, but present moment's truth has to be inquired into. So last line, let us look at it again. Bhagavan says, Indru unmai theradu, இறப்பு எதிர்வு தேர உணல் ஒன்றின்றி எண்ண உணல். Let us go to Sivaprakashan Pillai for a moment here. I had earlier made the promise that he does some wonderful summary. Now it's time to encash on some of those promissory notes. Now this is one of the beautiful summaries you will see about this verse, that Sivaprakashan Pillai says in his page 14 of Ulladu Narpadu commentary that இறப்பு எதிர்வு நிகழ்வு என்கிற முக்காலத்திலும் நமக்கு தோன்றுகிற பொருள்கள் எல்லாம் பலவித வடிவங்களா தோன்றினும் அவை யாவும் ஐம்புலன்களின் வடிவமே அல்லாமல் வேறல்ல. அவை யாவும் உண்மை வஸ்து ஒன்றிலிருந்து கற்பிதமாய் தோன்றுகின்றனவையே. ஆகையால் உண்மை வஸ்துவாகிய தன்னை இப்பொழுதே அறிய முயலாமல் இறந்த காலத்தில் நடந்த மித்தைகளையும் எதிர்காலத்தில் நடக்கப் போகும் மித்தைகளையும் அறிய விரும்புதல் எல்லையற்றதும் பயனற்றதுமான காரியத்தை செய்ய முயலுதலே ஆகும். He says that, let me summarize that for you. Very beautifully he encapsulates what we have to see in this verse. He says that whether in the past or in the present or in the future, let us say that we are engaged with many objects. And we have seen in verse number 13, Nanavam Jnanam Ajnanamam. Whenever we see multiplicity, that is only ignorance. That is only false knowledge. So, what Sivaprakashan Pillai is saying is that what is past, what is present, what is future is our engagement with the multiplicity of objects, and all this multiplicity of objects is only from the self. So, jnanamam tanemai nanavam jnanam ajnanamam. So that is where he takes that. Concern yourself that in this present moment also, if you are looking at yourself, seeing many objects, then it is your duty not to take it for granted that you are living in the present by engaging those objects. No, that's not what Bhagavan is teaching. Bhagavan is not teaching get engrossed in the objects in the present moment. No, Indru unmai theradu. As Sivaprakashan Pillai says, all those objects are mithai, are false knowledge. Whether it is a past mithai or future mithai or present mithai, doesn't matter. All the objective knowledge is to be seen as mithai. So it is something that is false. Indru unmai theradu. When Bhagavan says Indru unmai theradu, he does not mean engage with all your attention in all the objects in front of you. No. Indru unmai theradu. What is unmai according to Bhagavan? Unmai is not the multiplicity. It is like the multiplicity is like the ornament, and the truth is like the gold that is present in all the ornaments. And jnanamam taneme, the self that is full of existence consciousness, that alone is truth. So in this verse what Bhagavan is saying, eliminate the past, eliminate the future. In the present also, suppose you are in the present moment, you are seeing right across the entire universe standing in front of you as a sequence of objects. We have seen that it is not really in this moment. In this moment, if you go diagonally, the farthest object is about 1 million years away from us, and the nearest object is some nanoseconds away from us. That means when we see in front of us, we are seeing only the past. We are not seeing the present. There is a video by a physicist called Carlo Rivoli. You can go through that in the YouTube, The Illusion of Time. He has written a book on the order of time. So based on that, he has given some TED Talks and other talks in which the now moment, the science is now coming to the point that the now moment is illusory, because what is now for one is different from what is now for another, because science is still concerned with one and another. This is an interesting reference we get when one of the Swamijis, who was Madhavananda, I think, not very sure, he was interested very much in science and very much interested in the Einsteinian science of relativity, which had just then gained popularity. So he had brought it to Bhagavan and said that, Bhagavan, it is said that two people simultaneously, that is, the present moment, the now is frozen, according to them. The now is frozen to them at that time. Madhav Swami, the Swamiji is saying, two people, he is rippling Einstein, two observers in the same moment, separated by space, see the same object happening differently. Now, Bhagavan says, the error there, so that is the relativity of time and all that brings. But Bhagavan says that to think that there are two observers is the first mistake. That there is only one observer, and that is where we come to verse number 14. That Tanmai undel munne padarkaigal tamulavam. That means there the second person and all the third persons put together, all arranged depending on only one first person. Only one first person within, and when that first person removes himself by inquiry, then the second person and the third person also drop away and the self alone stands revealed. Now, the interesting thing is, what is this time? When we ask, we say that it is something in the mind which is present as past, present and future. But it is something having content which the mind can grasp. The mind can grasp and say, yeah, I have got hold of time. These are all my memories. These are all my present actions which I am facing. These are all in the anticipated future, but they are all in me. So, the ability to grasp this all is the Jiva Bhava. Is the Jiva Bhava. And when I grasp that, and when I understand that this is what is happening universally, this is what is happening in every jiva, not conceptually, actually I understand, because all other jivas arise, as per verse 14, only after my I thought arises. So what is that I thought which conceptualizes past, present and future? That is what Bhagavan says in Guru Vachaka Kovai, very interestingly. The meditation on time is a segment we have in Guru Vachaka Kovai, verse number 747. 747. Probably I'm running a bit late on time, but it's all right. Only those who after first seeing the time as themselves, only those who after seeing time as themselves, then abandon the vision completely, are the jnanis who have gained the immortality upon this earth. All others will fall under the eroding saw of time and perish. So, where do we come in the inquiry into time? Into inquiry into the truth of time? It is my own ability to grasp the past, present and future that is called time. And that is why Bhagavan says, time is only a thought inside you. All others are merely thought inside you. That I am the source, the first person is the source of the second and all other persons. To the first person, when the concept of the past, present and future arise, then that ability to grasp all these three and say, this is me, is me. And that is Jiva Bhava. So when the past moves away, some part of me dies. And when anticipation is there about future, I disturb myself. What is going to happen on behalf of the whole universe? Because I am now that universal Vishwamanava, I don't think of the context is that the whole Vishwa. What is going to happen to this whole Vishwa, let us say? What has happened? Are we treating the Vishwa properly? Did we treat it properly? Could we have done better? But that ability to grasp all the three is the Jiva Bhava. Now we have to inquire, is the first person who holds that things and grasps them, is he real? What is my reality? Who is this who is grasping past, present and future? Who am I when we inquire in the present moment? Indru unmai theradu. In the present moment, inquire into the truth of yourself who wants to grasp this past, present and future. Who is it that wants to grasp past, present, and future? It is me. Who am I? Takes one to that self, in which time itself is effaced. இன்றுண்மை தேராது இறப்பெதிர்வு தேரவுனல் ஒன்றின்றி எண்ணவுனல். Suppose one doesn't inquire in the present moment into the truth of oneself, who wants to grasp past, present, and future, then one gets trapped into the saw of time. Bhagavan says in Guru Vachakkove, but the self is within us. So by the anubhava of getting sawed, that my going away into the past or anticipating in the future is making me afraid of my own existence. Who am I who is grasping all these three and feeling that only in this content I exist as an entity? Who am I? That inquiry takes one to the self, where time itself is vanquished. So that is this verse. Let us put those ideas quickly together. Bhagavan says that holding on to the present alone, the past and future arise. Therefore, even when they occur, the past and the future are called as present. Therefore, there is the present alone. Living the present as a moment into which truth has to be inquired into when one goes into the past and future, that is merely like saying, I am going to count all the numbers without the number one. But there, the important point is not the analogy. The important point is, in the present moment, I have to inquire into the truth. What is this truth? We say that truth of time, let us say for the moment, where is time present? Time is present in the mind. Bhagavan also says, the other inquirers, including neuroscientists and physicists, come to the point that time is really present only in the mind. Now, we have gone further and seen in verse number 14 that the ability to grasp and say that when the consciousness grasps something and says that this is what is I am, this is what is me, then when I go to the root as the first person from whom the second and third person arise, and when the first person is vanquished, all the second and third person also vanquishes. Now for me, when past, present and future arise, I am that time, I am Kala. So for whom is the past, present, future? When we inquire, the attention becomes self-attentive, and when that self-attention is natural, the self stands alone, and this illusion of time is transcended in that Atma Jnana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in Atma Vicharam till 8 o'clock, when we will have Akka summarizing the verse for us. Namo Ramana. Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. We are, by Bhagavan's grace, on that very significant aspect of our lives, which is called time. And that is what rules our lives actually. Completely it rules our lives. We believe that we are bound by time. We believe that we have got a birth and a death, which is a space in time. There is a beginning and an end in time, which is what we call our life. So here Bhagavan is helping us to inquire into the nature of time. And he is so sweet that even when he is praying for his mother's recovery, he is praying to Arunachala to save her from what? From time, from the clutches of time. And he says, "Oh Arunachala, you are the death to death, or death to time, the end of time, the finishing of time is you. So you should reveal the glory of your feet so that my mother transcends the bondage to time." And having said that, very sweetly, he asks at the end of that very verse, "Arayir kalanume yar." If inquired into, then what is time? Who is time? So this power of inquiring into the nature of time, he has embedded even in the prayer for mother's recovery. And here he is giving us that portion to immortality, to transcend time, to transcend mortality, which is time-bound nature. How is he giving us this portion? As Nandakumarji pointed out to us very sweetly, it is by bringing to us the awareness that time is only in our mind. And how is it in our mind? It is in our mind in that the past is also in our mind in the present moment, and the future is also only in our mind in the present moment. So by giving us this clue, first, Bhagavan releases us from the clutches of the past and the future. He is telling us the past is only invited by you into the present moment. If you do not invite the past into the present moment, it is as good as being non-existent. So the past cannot have any power over us. It does not have any power over us unless and until we give it reality in the present moment. And the same thing holds true for the future as well. Ganesha Ranna recalled to me once that I do not know to which devotee Bhagavan said, "If you want to be free, then give up all your attachment to the past by recognizing that everything in the past has happened by God's will. You can be free of time," he says, Bhagavan says you can be free of time by recognizing, completely believing that everything in the past has happened only because of God's will. Then the devotee asked him, "What then of the future?" Bhagavan said, "If you can drop the entire past, recognizing that everything has happened only by God's will, the future will disappear automatically." Because the future is also dependent on the past. If there is no past, there can be no future. So in this continuum, Bhagavan says, in this present moment, we have the power either through surrender, by recognizing that everything is God's will and I am a nobody. That's what Muruganar Swami says. So I am a nobody, he says. That way we can also get rid of the past and the future, or by inquiring, by finding Indrunmai. What is the truth of this now, which is giving life to the past and the future? By inquiring into the nature of the now, we will be able to be completely free of the past and the future. First is to recognize that it is the I alone which is grasping the past and the future in the present moment. In the present moment alone. In every present moment alone. So in each and every present moment, the I may or may not grasp the past or the future. Bhagavan says we give attention to all the thoughts. The I thought gives attention to all the other thoughts and thereby gives reality to them. So we can drop the past and the future and inquire into the nature. Drop meaning, that's why Nadakumarji says, do not have any need to grasp them. If we recognize that we are afraid and therefore grasping, need not be afraid. Let us inquire into the nature of this I as it is now. Now, what is this now? If we inquire, we will recognize that every thought, this I in the now cannot be a thought, because every thought is a product of the past. It's a product of perception, as he quoted from Shiva Prakasham Pillai. Every thought which we have is a product of perception and knowledge of that perception, which means it's a product of the past. Even if I say I am Sharada, this statement is based in my knowledge which is springing from the past. And if I do not have knowledge that I am Sharada, if that is forgotten completely, I cannot say I am Sharada. I cannot declare that I am a particular entity except with the basis of past memory and past knowledge. So when this is completely dropped, when thought is understood to be only a mere product of the past, which is creating an unknown future, in this moment, when we recognize this and we can drop the thought as we have the freedom to do and inquire into the truth of the I as it is now, without any attachment to any thought, when we inquire, then the truth is revealed, says Bhagavan. It is free of all objective knowledge, which is a very, very important and significant point which was brought home to us today by Nandakumarji, which we should not lose sight of, because very often we think that being in the now, which is practiced in some other forms of meditation also, being in the now we think is paying attention to what is happening now. The objects which are present before us now, listening to the talk which is happening now, focusing on my speaking now. That is, I believe, some of us believe, is being in the present moment. But we can see clearly that just like the light which we see in the present moment is traveling from the past, the thoughts which we see in the present moment are all based on our past memories. So to be in the now, to experience the now, one must be ready to drop all the thoughts. To drop all the thoughts, the best and the simplest way to get into the now is through the inquiry, who am I? Because when one asks, really, genuinely has the question, who am I? There cannot be any clinging to any other memory or any other anticipation, because for whom is memory? For whom is anticipation? For whom is the concept of time? This is how Nandakumarji concluded the Manana today. So, for whom is it? When I ask, who am I? That is when I really get into the Indra Unmai, into the truth of the present moment. Because if I hold the I in any manner, it would only be a product of the past. And being a product of the past, it will then try to project into the future. But even if I cut off all the future and I cut off all the past, if I hold on to anything, if I grasp anything, saying, that's why in one of the subtle points also raised today, Nandakumarji said, even if we grasp nothingness, if there is a grasping, that is due to memory, that is due to a clinging to time. So, in the entirety of focus on who am I, without grasping any object, gross or subtle, when one remains or tries and makes an effort to remain with the I alone as it is. Is the present, isn't it? As it is. When one keeps trying through inquiry, which is made possible by grace, then that grace will reveal itself. This is Bhagavan's promise in every word of his, and in this verse also. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramana, sir.